Kevin Day, who replaced Frank Dickerson as CEO of TNA Wrestling a few weeks ago, has instilled a new attitude within the ranks of the company. Day, who is in his early 30s, was promoted from within Panda Energy to get the financial end of TNA running efficiently. He has made it clear that there is no room for any deadweight among management, creative, or talent. What the fuck is Jeff Jarrett still doing there?
Waka waka.
He is a bottom line kind of guy, says one TNA employee, who has been impressed with Day's energy and resolve. The feeling is that Day will do whatever is necessary to make TNA as financially solvent as possible, ridding TNA of any wasted expenditures. One source notes that if WCW had Day in the late 90s overseeing the company's expenses, they'd still be in business. Guarantee they fucking wouldn't.
That's insane. That's an insane statement.
The problem was just like they just didn't have a guy overseeing spending, which they didn't, but that's not what caused them to die. It doesn't mean TNA is operating on the cheap, but it does mean nobody can expect a guaranteed job due to tenure or even sacrifices made 3 years ago in the early stages of the company's operation. His predecessor, Frank Dickerson, was more laid back. In his late 50s, Dickerson was a father figure, interested in getting to know everybody as people. He served a valuable role in getting contracts organized last year. Day entered his job with almost zero knowledge of pro wrestling, but a strong track record within Panda as a bottom line type of guy who can cut waste, but recognize where money needs to be spent. The structure of the company and who is responsible for what is being worked out as the company continues to grow from a father-son operation to a significant division of a large corporation. So this is basically just taking TNA further into the house of Panda Energy. It's not something we've seen recently.
It seems to be that with this company, there seems to be a point where the company that owns the company will eventually want to be more involved, whether that be in a creative aspect or just a, hey, let's sort out the finances so that everything's in line here.
And I think that's largely true of any corporately owned wrestling company.
Yeah.
Where like WCW increasingly saw like Time Warner get involved. WWE, I think, will increasingly see Endeavor get involved in their day-to-day operations. Like, it's just the way the beast. Sinclair and Ring of Honor, same thing. Like, Sinclair increasingly getting involved in Ring of Honor operations. It's like, when you have that corporate owner, eventually that corporate owner is going to be like, fuck you wrestling people, we know what we're doing better than you do.
I'm sorry, I seem to have converted Big Daddy Beef 69.
To a patron or a listener?
To a listener, but also to someone who is not angry at me.
Drop a Patreon.
Yes!
Again, to give us
I have proven the thesis wrong! Big Daddy Beef 69 is now on my side!
Did you not just say you've thrown your phone out of the room?
Yeah, I opened up the tab.
You cannot help yourself, sir. Just a sneaky little tab open. Just a little peek. Just a little peek at the mentions. I have to see.
I got an itch. I got an itch.
Kevin Day is getting heat that anyone in that position would get. Dickerson, as Dave goes through, that Dickerson was like a wrestling guy and had good and bad points, but people liked him. But Day is not as close with talent. Dickerson, who ended up getting into TNA so much that when he was given word he was being transitioned out, he talked about getting backers and trying to buy the company.
Wait a minute.
It's insane how this always happens.
Okay, composing oneself here.
Yep.
Is this just like what happens with every company eventually?
Yeah, apparently. Because again, even if you just want to get out of perhaps current TNA and go to like WCW, it was the same thing with Bischoff. Like Bischoff trying to buy the company when he realized his time was running out, you know?
Yeah.
Or like Jeff Jarrett tried to do the same thing with TNA, you know, when he was being ousted by Toby Keith, who passed away, I think, before we did the last episode of the podcast in between. Like, Toby Keith was nearly TNA owner in, was it like 2013 or whatever, Jeff left. Like, and Jeff was like, oh, I want to buy it from Dixie with Toby Keith. So like, there is like a pretty relentless history. Like, Billy fucking Corgan did the same thing.
He did have the ability to talk to wrestlers asking for raises, turn them down, and still have the wrestlers like him and sympathize with his position.
People must have loved Frank Dickerson.
People love Frank Dickerson. He tried to get more funding for the company, but was cut after he didn't turn a profit. By the company that owns them, who put their own guy in charge.
To keep costs in line, because I can't.
It's interesting. It's just an interesting observation.
Time will tell the reactions today, since the same people will be asking for the same things. Reports that Day has been told to cut spending appear to be exaggerated, if not outright incorrect. There have been no orders from the top regarding having to get rid of any talent. The idea that talent that isn't pulling their end can be gone is actually the booking committee not wanting guys coasting right now.
Makes sense.
Which is the reason they're bringing in every former WCW wrestler they can find. Not that I have an objection to like trying to get Goldberg or actually bringing in Scott Steiner, but like you can't be like, oh, we don't want guys coasting who can't carry their weight, and also hire every WCW alumni we can get our hands on.
Like, it's funny, we talked about it when AEW started about the whole idea that just because someone was in WWE, it doesn't mean you shouldn't sign them. Because like there is like a similar statement that could be made that it's like, especially in 2006, a lot of like actual stars are people that have been in one company now for a few years because WCW's been gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, I see the merit on being like, we should go for some guys, but it's like, there is like, I think part of it is we look back on it with hindsight 2020, we look back on it and we see like, these guys suck, why are we doing this with like, and then in the moment, you know, these people could have thought they had potential or could have filled out a role, which doesn't inherently make them like a bad pickup. Like, it's easy for us to look at bringing in a Shannon Moore and being like, this is stupid and dumb. But like, this is a guy that, you know, might have been able to, like, there is an alternate reality where this guy like hits, you know, and does well for the company, I guess. But I think you can always go back to how they're used over everything. Like, him and the AJ feud isn't, that's what TNA seemed to always make their problems, is they would bring like guys in and then at the detriment of their existing talent.
Yeah, and like Steve Macklin, I think, is like almost the best case, maybe in TNA history, of a guy that if you had polled 100 wrestling fans before he was signed and asked, should they sign the guy from the Forgotten Sons, I think a vast majority of people would have said, why on earth would you do that?
Yeah.
And then they did that, and he fucking rocks, you know? So, like, I'm a firm believer in TNA as the land of second chances. Shannon Moore maybe a tad less so, because I see you replying to tweets. I get the notifications because you tagged the podcast Twitter. Stitter.
No, it's okay. We've come together. It's unifying now. It's actually a beautiful message about what we were talking about.
But Shannon Moore is like a known entity, I think, in 2006. So he isn't the guy I would have personally taken a punt on. But you are right that there is nuance there. It's not just a hard yes or no. It's a balance.
And especially like looking at it from a 2006 perspective, where we haven't quite gone to the like point of what will become the LOL TNA Hogan era, bringing in everyone, like, you know what I mean? Like, we certainly have blinders of being people who have lived through the absolute worst of these examples.
You could argue we're currently in the ramp up in like March 2006, because like by 2007, when you get like the Bashams and Test and Rikishi and all these people showing up where they do seem desperate for literally any WWE guy they can get their hands on, you're like, but so like you can actually look at like this month where they do bring in Steiner. They did recently add Sting and 3D and Rhino and Shannon Moore and Christian. Like they are, and like most of those guys I named, I think are one way or another worth bringing in some capacity. But you are seeing like the ramp up of like, we need to sign guys with names as opposed to we need to trust the people we have.
Yeah, but you know, again, we're looking at it with like, we know what's going to happen instead of like, I guess there's no place for optimism from us doing a historical podcast.
Yeah, that is the problem. We can't sit here and be like, I hope they don't go too far on this thing. We know they do. Like we can't be like, oh god, I hope Shannon Moore isn't a sign of things to come.
But also it is interesting to be like, try and get into the mindset of the company at the time too.
And like there does seem to be pressure from Spike to get more stars, and there is like I didn't include much rating stuff this month because rating stuff bores me to tears, but like ratings have stagnated on Spike, and if not like went a little bit down. They're like doing like 0.7 to 800,000 people a week at the moment, which is a little below where they were at the start. So I think there is some hand wringing about that, and like what can we do to start getting that number to continue to grow. And like we'll talk about their primetime spot was taken away. We'll talk about that in a minute. So like there is some like, what can we do to get this thing really cooking at the moment? And their answer to that is what it always is, the short-term fix of what can we get a Bill Goldberg. It's not how can we make people care even more about AJ Styles. It's like the easiest thing is just to get a Bill Goldberg, because that's a short-term fix and it will work, as opposed to you have to actually put time and effort and creative vision into making AJ more popular.
But I was told that they knew how to build stars around their
Don't you go back to
Stings,
tweets.
Bookers and RVDs?